This lispy queer's channel was demonetized. So, hey, thanks for being the patsy who was willing to go on a full-scale crusade that ended up getting my channel demonetized. I'll assume you're being sarcastic, but it was my pleasure, even though I've never watched your channel. Why would you assume this was a good thing if you have never seen my videos? I imagine you're yet another broflake anti-SJW who can't get a date or something, and so you take out your frustrations on the women who wouldn't have even give you the time of day in high school. I'm gay. Then you're probably another one of those Milo Yiannopoulos wannabes who is simply so much of a coward that he won't show his face. Yeah, I suppose you could call me a coward if you think that me preferring not to get milkshaked or worse is cowardly. Well, maybe you should stop being a white supremacist. I'm not even remotely white supremacist, or racist for that matter. In fact, I've made 3 videos criticizing the alt-right in depth, and I've made numerous videos with the intent of helping the black demographic, mainly in regards to the ways that feminism abuses black males at the detriment of their communities as a whole. So you are trying to colonize the black community with a patriarchal attempt to fight against gender equality? That's even worse. Look, if you have such a problem with fascists being milkshaked, you obviously are one. So let me get this straight. I'm a fascist because I don't want to be milkshaked by people who haven't even watched my videos? I'm blocking you on Twitter. Hey Carlos, it's Prince of Queens. I'm addressing this video to you specifically, but keep in mind that I know it's not just you who is behind this. Your bosses and political allies in high places have been wanting to do this for me and countless others for a very long time, as I'm shadow banned pretty much everywhere besides Minds and BitChute, and I've gotten 4 completely absurd hate speech strikes, and most of my videos were already being demonetized anyway, which is odd because everybody thinks of me as one of the nice channels of the genre. I won't bore people by listing out all of my absurd hate speech strikes because there's 4 of them, but the one that was the most outlandish was for this video. I'm a feminist, bro. Blair White was attacked IRL. That'll link in this video's description. Seriously, watch it, and you'll see for a fact that I must have been being targeted for what I was talking about, and not any offensive way I spoke. They definitely target channels that criticize feminism. Have you ever listened to Susan W. speak? Also, after the full channel demonetization, it became evident that my haters have been scanning my videos and attempting to report everything, as this video from years ago was flagged and deemed age-restricted, even though it's just a funny story with no pictures about a stripper who tried to turn me straight. Clearly, I am under attack for my political views, and people are looking for mere excuses to shut me down, which adds a rather interesting angle if you think about the saying, you know who is in power by who you aren't allowed to criticize, as I criticize communism and the left quite a great deal. But you see, more so, Carlos, I'm one of the few freedom of speech advocating voices on YouTube that also happens to be occasionally called a lispy queer. Though, aside from pointing out that a gay accent is not the same as a lisp, I don't really care about that. I care about the fact that I am being politically targeted by a company that once employed me that I got over 3 million views for. Now, as you know, a lot of people are really mad at you, and I obviously share their frustrations, and I have for a while longer than very recently when you got notorious for your attempt to purge YouTube of non-far leftist content. You see, I have long been saying that Vox is the most despicable outlet on the internet. You can ask some of my friends. Now that Mike, Gawker, and Everyday Feminism don't have much or any presence anymore. I saw the writing on the wall early on that the corporations and elites that backed the far left were apparently placing almost all of their online bets on the company that you work for, minus their clear support of ContraPoints, who I've made a recent video about as well. However, I don't think your success as a corporate teacher's pet should go to your head, because while you have been getting a lot of views on such videos as the one where you took mysterious audio of an unmentioned origin to very obviously and dishonestly attempt to smear Tucker Carlson,
the boss convinces the workers to accept their exploitation by pointing their anger in the wrong direction. Or as Tucker Carlson would say,
one thing you learn when you grow up in a castle and look out across the moat every day at the hungry peasants out in the village is you don't want to stoke envy among the proletariat.
Thanks, Tucker.
In which you were dumb enough that you included audio in your own video, which proves that this was by no means any sort of current recording.
By all measures, Tucker Carlson is a member of the American elite.
How do you pay your bills?
Well, I'm extraordinarily loaded just from money I, inherited.
You're a trust fund baby, are you not?
No, completely. I've never needed to work. I mean, it's all just the whole cable news thing. It was like a phase I was going through.
So what is going on here?
In spite of the fact that I am personally very annoyed by your relentless obsession with lying about and cyberbullying Tucker, which is undoubtedly one of the reasons why your comrades ended up doxing him and harassing his wife at his home address, I still don't think you're winning here. You see, the main thing that has garnered you attention is most likely simply the fact that you're the gullible schmo Ezra Klein decided to use to peddle some of the more obviously calculated and dishonest smears that his outlet is responsible for, because he undoubtedly is smart enough to know perfectly well that his reputation would be in ruins in no time if he said the types of things that you just can't stop saying. I mean, let's be honest. When you got the job at Vox and then eventually became one of their biggest stars, you undoubtedly thought something to the effect of, "Wow, this is awesome. I didn't realize I'd be so popular. I must be more of a genius than I realized." When really, you're not, and you're being played like a fool. You see, while I believe Ezra Klein is one of the most despicable figures in contemporary media, if not maybe one of the single most diabolically evil people on the entire internet, I will give him some credit where credit is due. He's smart. Granted, he's smart in the type of way where it's not hard to imagine him doing something like getting wealthy enough to start a media company after swindling elderly people out of their retirement money, but smart nonetheless. And FYI, no, I am not actually saying he's done anything like that. I don't have any evidence to point to anything of that nature. It's just an observation about what appears to be his nature.
Ezra, you have a theory about this case that I am strongly attracted to. I have a doubt about it, but I want you to present the theory about what Trump's doing with the wall, and we will discuss.
Theory is this: he's doing nothing. He's doing nothing at all to get the wall. I thought the tweet today was a perfect piece of evidence in support of the theory. You do not have a negotiating session. Walk in, storm out, then send out a tweet bragging about how you said bye-bye to Nancy and Chuck after giving them candy, I guess, because they would not give you what you wanted when you didn't offer anything at all. From the beginning of this, I've said that there's something, the measure of somebody's commitment, of a politician's commitment to a policy, is not how often they ask for it, but what they're willing to trade away to get it. So far, Donald Trump has been willing to trade away nothing. If he wanted the wall, he would make an offer to give the Democrats something they wanted in order to get the wall. What he wants is for his own base to see him fighting.
That being said, being hired to work for this guy and then being trusting enough in his vision to go on to make some of the most slanderous and most well-viewed videos from the outlet, and then attempting to try to get people banned, called for advertisers to go on strike even more than they already are, and having succeeded in demonetizing Crowder and a ton of others, including little old gay me, well, I can assure you, doing this is literally the worst thing that has ever happened to your career, and maybe in your life. Honestly, it's very clear that you're not just accidentally getting things wrong or making bad choices, both of which I think are probably true as well, but worse, you're a liar. And I think you know perfectly well that you're lying when you do it, at least in a number of cases. I'm positive you knew perfectly well you were lying about Tucker with that smug little grin, and don't pretend that you weren't. Now, I realize you're very privileged after having worked for Media Matters directly, so you probably don't think you'll ever face any consequences for your actions, but you've made a lot of enemies over the last few weeks, probably well over 100,000, by attempting to ruin the livelihoods of every non-teacher's pet on an entire huge platform. And there will be more enemies to come. enemies who won't forgive you. This, of course, has opened you up to a lot of scrutiny from people who not only just don't agree with your Marxist politics like Steven Crowder mainly does, but also people now have a specific axe to grind with you for things you have done which might dramatically negatively affect their lives. And so, of course, everybody is already scrambling to pull up dirt on you, and so far, it's been remarkably easy. In this tweet, you advocated for physical assault and harassment of individuals you don't agree with, and considering the fact that your attitude thus far has been to double down on absolutely everything you do or say, I can imagine that you're going to keep breaking actual and legitimately fair rules that the social media platforms claim to enforce. Perhaps your privileged status by your employment with Vox and Media Matters might keep you safe enough from immediate career ruin or legal action, but perhaps it won't. How trusting are you that Ezra is going to keep you on board after you're nothing more than a detriment to his brand? Again, don't you think that if Ezra didn't know that this stuff was wrong, he would have done it himself? I'm gonna let you in on something honest that I don't really talk about very much. I don't particularly like Steven Crowder. However, as a result of your actions, I've watched more of his channel, and am considering buying a mug. Still, while he can be pretty funny sometimes, he's been fairly consistently rude to many of his guests, and I don't think he has the most integrity out of the big conservative content creators and pundits. And sure, as a gay guy, I do cringe a little bit when he says things like this, which is not uncommon.
Before we get to the video, with our favorite lispy sprite from Vox. It's ridiculous. It's bonkers. You're being given a free pass as a crappy writer because you're gay.
That's center line in his little queer graph there.
Well, now the graph is queer? This is what Mr. Gay Vox wants to do. Mr. Lispy Queer from Vox. What were you holding, Gay Latino from Vox?
However, I don't find this stuff particularly offensive. Personally. Rather, I just think it's a cheap and counterproductive way of approaching his actual criticisms of you, which everybody knows comes from your absurdly obtuse and downright dangerous political views. I mean, who cares about the fact that you do have a slight lisp on top of your typical gay accent? A lisp in which I exaggerated because I'm not a particularly good actor. I also don't really like this shirt, but not so much because he inferred the word that rhymes with bag and starts with an F. Rather, I think it's simply untrue. Here's the thing. Most of the people who claim to be socialists are more communist than socialist anyway, and I don't think anybody can point to a single communist or probably even true socialist regime that actually treated gay men well in any way, shape, or form. Not only is this something that's been consistent historically, but I believe it will always be that way, due to the fact that communism literally cannot work as long as scarcity exists, because punishing people for being productive will lead to the very obvious shortage of economic productivity within those nations, which will always result in an economic collapse, citizens revolting, and then firmer and firmer ways of stomping out dissenters. In the past, this has led to gulags and concentration camps for homosexuals, like those in Cuba, which is, I guess, the nation that your family was from. And there's a very simple reason why gay men are treated so horribly. It's not merely that the specific dictators responsible viewed male homosexuality as a sign of bourgeois capitalism, which actually makes some sense if you think in communist terms, which I for one absolutely don't, but more so, once the authoritarian clampdowns against dissenters become more and more severe, punishing even people suspected of being counter-revolutionary, homosexuals will always be on the top of the list for a very simple reason. Gay men are difficult to control because they don't have families to worry about generally. So if they are starving anyway, they have no reason to cooperate with the government so that they can work to provide things for other people's children. Regardless, Carlos, Besides your politics and your vindictive and self-important urge to tattle to the authorities to get whatever you want at the cost of our Constitution, what I have a problem with about you is the fact that you're one of the many gay guys that is giving a horrible name to us by using your homosexuality as not just a shield to protect yourself from criticism, but also as a sword, as you've weaponized your protected class status to abuse people less privileged than you are. At the very least, I could buy a new gaming console or two if I had $1 for all of the comments and kind words I've gotten as a result of my channel, strictly from the people who say things like, "You're proof that gay guys can be cool. I thought I didn't like gay guys, but I guess it's really just the ones that are whiny SJWs." Kind of a bit like this comment. To be honest, these comments are always bittersweet, because no matter how many times I insist that there's all sorts of cool gay guys that most people would like if they got to know or simply gave a chance, with so many guys like you around, I unfortunately can understand where they are coming from. Sadly, I can kind of even see where the "socialism is for figs" shirt came from, due to logically void people like yourself. Gay guys who believe the big lie. I assume you must be getting a fat paycheck to be doing what you're doing, or you're hoping for one, and if that's the case, then there's nothing I can do or say that will actually help you to become a better and more honest person, at least right now. Hell, maybe you'll even say I have internalized homophobia or something, even though I'm one of the few non-leftist gays that basically never gets that accusation. But on the off chance that you might come around and realize that you don't have to make yourself public enemy number one to the internet, I'll offer you just one more thing. I think you're making bad choices because you were stoked when your mediocrity was rewarded so handsomely, with the caveat that you sell your soul and integrity for things I doubt you entirely believe in and maybe don't even properly understand. But you can always cut that out and educate yourself instead. That's really all I can offer. Now, about my personal demonetization, because that's why most people would view this video, as they are probably surprised. They've told me so. Though, of course, I'm not surprised at all. It was for hate speech, which is laughable if you actually watch my channel compared to countless channels who weren't demonetized, of all political persuasions, really. Still, I've given this a lot of thought, and I believe that hate speech being inserted as an actual tangible standard is done for political reasons. You see, the most obvious conclusion I've come to is that I'm probably being targeted because I'm vehemently opposed to the current incarnation of the left, which is almost entirely Marxist and feminist rooted, but is now totally wedded to corporatism. This is most easily demonstrated by the fact that they'll never just tell us what we did wrong exactly and how to avoid doing it. I honestly think they actually want us to mess up, so that they have an excuse to ban certain types of channels. So more specifically, why am I a target? Well, I think the reason I was undoubtedly first put on their radar was because I am a gay guy that was 100% immersed in not just the left, but the far left over the course of my entire life, being raised by a feminist in Seattle, being born in the early 80s, and living in New York City, San Francisco, and Oakland, never questioning my beliefs until 2015, which I believe was the year that the left showed their true colors first. And I certainly knew what I was talking about when I criticized the left from an inside perspective, which they have a very tangible reason to fear. But more so, a specific thing that undoubtedly put a target on my back from your affiliates is that I have been openly critical of Media Matters, ever since I learned what they actually do as smear merchants and media organizers who put together elaborate, dishonest narratives for various outlets to run with. This is something that has actually really bugged me for a long time, as it started when I passionately supported Sanders in 2016, as I noticed personally some of my actual real-life friends turning on me during the primaries and relentlessly calling me a misogynist online for my support of him very randomly and unfoundedly. Like, I was not talking about gender at all, and they're like, how dare you support the non-woman? So obviously I thought that it seemed so irrational that some of them were being paid to do it. It just seemed like that. And then I found out that people were actually paid to do that by the Clinton campaign by way of Media Matters. More so, while I already knew I was definitely on some sort of channels we hate list that the Silicon Valley elites and their workers had organized by the time I started making videos about ContraPoints, as I was shadow banned for a while before I made even my first video about Contra over a year ago, I still definitely think my intense and carefully researched criticisms of their biggest blue chip independent creator that's being favored by all of the social media companies like YouTube and probably Twitter, I imagine that criticizing this horrible, awful, dishonest creator is almost certainly something that put yet another target on my back. As I state in my most thorough and comprehensive video shown here, ContraPoints seems to be about at the same level of privilege by the social media/media companies as Anita Sarkeesian has been, as they talk about much of the same crap, are friends with each other, and are promoted by some of the same big money feminist media organizations like the XOXO Festival, which they both spoke at. And they were both promoted in the mainstream blogosphere kind of a lot. I won't go into any more details about that though, because I talk about it in the video a great deal. Furthermore, I believe that my historical videos that attempt to debunk some of the recently pushed myths about the LGBTQ+ community has put yet another target on my back. This video, which debunks the narrative that Sylvia Rivera was some sort of feminist hero that started and led the Stonewall movement, is a good example, because it was flagged with a copyright strike a day or two after my demonetization, which provides a decent amount of circumstantial evidence that this was a reason to target me. And oddly, this time, they didn't even tell me which part was the copyright. And that's strange, considering the footage I used was from the early 70s and early 90s. Another thing that has probably gotten under the skin of the type of places that would employ you and be more than okay with the fact that you are an open Marxist is that I have extensively studied what very few people seem to really know about, which is the history of the United States Communist Party, and in particular its connections with contemporary politics and activism, particularly regarding intersectional feminism. I've also been very critical of Antifa and outlets like the SPLC and the ADL. Now, there's probably a few more things that struck a particular nerve with the establishment that seems to control YouTube. In particular, videos like this one that got a very strangely low amount of views, even though people who watched it said they really liked it, as if it was shadow banned in some unknown way. And it's about Silicon Valley's ties to the far left, which I literally know a lot about due to my personal experiences with a massive amount of tech workers. It's videos like these that I believe are the ones that likely really make them want to silence me. And while it definitely is possible that they might just want to shut me up because I'm a crazy loon that is totally wrong about everything. I mean, he said something that sounds like a conspiracy. You're saying the left conspires with corporate companies? They say that they hate capitalism. That will never happen. Despite the fact that some people would say that, I'm fairly confident that it's the reverse, especially considering how much hard evidence I include in all of the videos. I imagine, more than anything, they want me silenced not because I make all sorts of Islamophobic or racist videos or something, which I don't. In fact, I try to avoid criticizing Islam on the platform and my videos are not racist. But because they know I'm correct about my assessments of the issues and history I do discuss. Still, although I do imagine that there are reasons they really have a problem with me, I assume they still have a number of excuses they'd use if they were confronted with the unjustness of my demonetization, as their claim was hate speech after all. For example, I'm an open men's rights advocate, which the Southern Poverty Law Center decided to claim was a male supremacist organization, even though they had specifically said that it wasn't at one point. Another example is that although I'm actively compassionate towards trans people and have said so numerous times and not infrequently have trans guests on my channel who are actually my friends, I do have a tendency to make fun of the non-binaries, but mainly just the ones who demand gender-neutral pronouns. Not because I have a major problem with gender-confused or androgynous people, but because I don't agree with people trying to force other people to literally change how they speak in grammatically incorrect ways. And yes, there are many circumstances in which it is grammatically incorrect, and even if it can be grammatically correct, it's still almost universally confusing. Still, I don't hate those people inherently. I won't really hang out with them, but I've known a number of people who are definitely beyond gender atypical that have never transitioned and are cool people. Still, I just wish the ones who demand gender-neutral pronouns would tell others that they can refer to them as a she, a he, or a they. Because that's what the people that I was friends with unanimously used to do, at least a few years ago. I've also called people trans-trenders, but of course that shouldn't be any sort of sin, because we know for a fact that in many cases it is a literal trend. Hence the growing commonness of detransitioning, such as the first man to ever be legally documented as non-binary in Oregon, who ended up going on hormones to have no gender at all, and then detransitioned. These are the main things that I imagine they would use to claim I'm some sort of bigot, and although it's entirely unfair, apparently they'll make their rules as broad and vague as possible, so that they always will have a convenient excuse to ban or demonetize people in the same type of way that you did, Carlos, when you attacked Steven Crowder for the way he spoke about your skin color and sexuality, instead of admitting that you simply want him silenced for political reasons. It's cheap, cowardly, and dishonest. But, oh well, I suppose that's the world we're living in, at least for now. But I assure you, not only will this happening probably give me a small, teeny bit of a Streisand effect, as this will likely be the first time numerous people have heard of me, as it will be super interesting that a pretty PC, non-leftist gay guy was silenced by the gay guy who is whining about homophobia, but more so, the demonetized YouTubers and our collective audience will certainly see what we can do about this together, as Google is already facing a Department of Justice antitrust investigation anyway, and maybe people will end up supporting the politicians and figures who finally managed to obtain a free speech appropriate internet. So really, perhaps your little plan will backfire entirely, the internet will be made great again, people will end up supporting the politicians you are attempting to vex, because people like you have unfairly attacked their online media support, and people will start looking into them more. And of course, you might even lose your job entirely if Vox goes under, just like all the other outlets like you. And if that's the case, maybe you'll get a small bit of compassion from me someday, several years from now. But of course, at the moment, well, I wouldn't even throw a drink on you if I ever ran into you at a gay bar, because it's simply just not worth it. Rather, I'd utilize your greatest strategy. I'd smugly giggle at you with my friends and wouldn't try to hide it all that much. That's all I have to say for this video. Donations are always appreciated, especially now that I won't be getting a YouTube check every month. And of course, now is the time to make for absolute certain to follow me on minds.com and definitely BitChute, as I am very active on both and I might be shut down at any time. And if you're new, you can always try subscribing and see what that even does anymore. Have a good day.